And that's it. With that, I would like to welcome our first invited speakers, Iain Murray. Iain, please feel free to join me. So Iain comes from University of Edinburgh. He did his PhD at UCL with Zulindar Ameni and his postdoc in Toronto with Geoffrey Hinton and Rob O'Neill and Sam Rose. So he's working in probabilistic modeling and NCNC. Thank you.
So thanks very much for coming early in the morning. So I thought, what am I going to talk about? I'll look at the workshop website and see what you guys do. So the workshop website correctly points out that approximate Bayesian inference is dominated by variational methods and Monte Carlo methods. And certainly in my background in statistics, Monte Carlo methods were traditionally always the way to do things. They're the most trusted methods when people really care about the parameter inference. And here in the machine learning community, stochastic variational inference has exploded. And when I look at the posters, I see that's sort of a lot of what we're doing. So I thought I'd start the day just doing something different. I'd look at some of the alternative ways of doing approximate inference, reflect on why are we doing it, and I've got some things that I just don't know how to do, so it's sort of open challenges for you. So I thought I'd start by mentioning this paper. So I did my PhD methods on Monte Carlo methods. So this paper that said Monte Carlo is fundamentally unsound was always a little bit worrying. Who's seen this paper? Yeah, so if you're working in this space of approximate inference, you know, I recommend that you look at this paper if you didn't know that Monte Carlo is fundamentally unsound. I won't go through it now, but I think in certain problems, this paper has a point. You know, I like Monte Carlo methods, but sometimes there's a point. And this is one of the places in cosmology where I think Monte Carlo methods are used, and it's a bit weird. So this is a typical plot of posterior distributions from different astronomy cosmology experiments. So the axes are parameters of a cosmological model. So the x-axis omega n is one of the models, the parameters in this model lambda CDM. So the model has 7 free parameters and extensions of it have more parameters. And then you do different experiments and you get different posterior beliefs from the different experiments. And you want to capture the whole posterior distribution from an experiment because given one of the experiments, you have no idea where either of the parameters are. But given another experiment, your beliefs intersect with that, and when you combine all of the knowledge you have, you end up having a relatively small ball that says this is where the parameters are. Now, at least in the community of cosmologists that I talk to, these plots are often generated using Monte Carlo methods. So there's a link in the bottom to this package Cosmosys, and it contains all of the likelihoods and a load of Monte Carlo methods, and you can plug and play these things together and sort of see what they do in this community. And so what would this sort of Monte Carlo method look like? You'd be doing something like Metropolis Hastings or a fancier version of the MCMC method in this 7-dimensional space, or maybe a 50-dimensional space if you have some nuisance parameters. And then you just look at which omega m's you visited, which w's you visited, and you draw this plot. And each of the steps of that algorithm are really expensive. So you go away and do maybe seconds or minutes or more computer time just to decide whether to accept or reject something in, to wander around this plot. And it's crazy because you've done all this computation to understand the likelihood of this setting of the parameters, and then you just completely forget it and move on. But they don't want to go to variational methods. They've got these sort of posteriors, they don't really trust variational methods, and it's a big battle to get people to move away from the methods they trust. So what I thought I'd mention is this old idea in the machine learning community of a recognition network, which has not really taken off in statistics at all, and I think could have done. So this idea is let's create a training set to do machine learning. We'll sample parameters from our bias, so we get different settings of the cosmological parameters that are plausible. And then we could generate different data sets for each of those parameters. So for each parameter we draw, we could run a simulation. We could simulate gravity, we could simulate our telescope crater, and we'd get some vector. So in cosmology, this vector x would be something like a massive power spectrum. It would be like 100 numbers summarizing the results of the simulation. So you could run many simulations and you get a data set. You get some parameters and some data that go with them. And that's something you could do machine learning on. So you could learn to do a guessing game. If someone gives you a power spectrum, they give you an X, you could guess what cosmology generated that power spectrum. But we know from this plot that you can't actually guess the parameters very well, you'll be uncertain. So you'd actually like to guess a whole distribution, say this is sort of the ball of parameters that I think your parameter was assigned. So there's a long history of this stuff on recognition networks. In machine learning, it was sort of in the wake-sleep algorithm and these sort of generic latent variable models. Iain Murray, sort of more than 15 years ago, had a paper saying you could use this idea to inference in models that we've written down that mean something. And it has some attention in the statistics community. So we had a paper on this idea at NIPS last year. George and I wrote this paper, and there's a paper at NIPS this year by Luckman et al. That was sort of following on from that. They pointed out that if you run our code on a real problem, it falls over and breaks, and they fix some of the problems. So you can follow up on that paper. But the high-level idea is this thing that you have this data set, and you fit this conditional distribution of what do I believe about the parameters that we use to generate some power spectrum or some data form. And there's like old school technology behind this. So this idea of mixed density networks is in Chris Bishop's 1995 textbook. It was a tech report he wrote in 1984. You have a neural network where you throw in your data. It could be a power spectrum, 100 numbers saying what the power spectrum looks like. And the output is a distribution that guesses what parameters it was generated by. So it could be, here is a guess of the parameters and a covariance matrix saying here's an elliptical ball, or in the mixed density network you have the parameters of the mixture of Gaussians. So you spit out the parameters of a model that says this is what you should believe. So what we did in this paper was you fit that model, you fit this guessing game based entirely on simulated data. You haven't looked through a telescope at this point at all. And then you look through your telescope, you measure some power spectrum, and there's no MCMC to do, there's no variational inference, you just throw that data into the neural net and it says this is what you should believe. So it's sort of a neat idea until you go, oh crap, neural networks, they need like tens of thousands of data points to fit them well, and these simulations are really, really expensive. So we want to be sort of a bit conservative with our computing usage. So what we did was we went, we know we'll be Bayesian, so we'll use Bayesian neural networks so that we don't overfit, and we'll only use a small number of simulations to start with. So if we do that, this distribution will be broader than the true posterior, because our uncertainty will contain the uncertainty we should have that's embodied in the model and the physics. Given this observation, there's only so much we can know. But it will also contain this uncertainty that we haven't figured out what's going on yet. We haven't run enough simulations to learn how the parameters in the data relate to each other. But we have some idea. We've now got a tighter set of beliefs on the parameters than our prior. And so that tells us where it would be useful to run simulations. We could go in and run more simulations from parameters that are plausible and fit a better neural net. So in the paper we said, we'll refine the fit and we'll have this iterative process where we'll draw simulations and then we'll improve our neural network fit, and in the end we'll have something that tells us what to believe. Now, I think a lot of the people here are more interested in approximate Bayesian inference for machine learning rather than any of this science stuff. So here's the challenge for you. This stuff doesn't really work very well. You should be able to run one simulation, and if you really believed in the Bayesian machinery behind your neural nets, and you thought you could set up good priors and make good approximations, you could run one simulation, update your beliefs, it would tell you a revised approximate posterior, you could run one more simulation, and you could iterate like that. And the reality is that it doesn't really work. We had to run batches of at least 100 simulations to get reasonable fits, and the sort of very hacky variational method we were using didn't really work if we had small data sets. I'm not even clear if this would work if you had really good approximate Bayesian techniques, because I'm not convinced by the priors inside these neural nets. Bayesian methods can easily give you silly answers if you don't have a really sensible hierarchical prior, and when you've got a neural net with hundreds of thousands or more parameters, I think you've got to be really careful. So I think approximate Bayesian methods have really proved themselves as useful regularization heuristics for neural nets, but the challenge is to make it so we can actually really believe the uncertainty and take it seriously and not have to add hacks on avoid shooting and so on. Okay, so I thought I would reflect a little bit on what goes wrong when these models aren't fit. So as I said, this belief we have will be more uncertain than the true Bayesian belief because we've got limited simulation data, and neural nets haven't got all the same knowledge that our physics model does. So what happens when we underfit? So here's like a cartoon sketch. Let's imagine some power spectrum, some data point. In parameter space, these magenta points are samples from the true posteriors. So those are the funky cartoon beliefs that we're going to pretend that we should have. Now let's imagine that we can't capture all of that. Either we don't have enough data in high dimensions, or we've got a limited parametric model. Our neural net might fit a Gaussian to that. So that's the maximum likelihood Gaussian fit all this data. And what will happen in our approximate posterior is there'll be regions where we say, oh yeah, there are plausible parameters. We sample the Gaussian, we get points everywhere inside the array. So we won't rule out parameters that we should. But on the other hand, we don't massively rule out parameters that we should. We've unfortunately given less probability to these points out here than we should have done. But the KL objective that we're fitting doesn't make us put ridiculously small probability on them. We haven't completely cut them off. You compare that to what you do in a variational method, the classic KL Q to P variational method, you would cut off these arms. If you were fitting a Gaussian, you would fit it inside this core part of the distribution, and you would throw other parts away. And I think if you have a method based on GANs, you'd probably do something similar. You wouldn't want to generate parameters that are obviously wrong, because the discriminator would catch you, and so you'll cut things off, and that's a trade-off you'll make. So, for me reporting beliefs about a model, I would much rather do what these recognition networks do than what a variational method or a GAN would do. I'd much rather go, you know, I've got limited resources, and so I'm not going to be able to pull in the beliefs as tight as I could. But I'm not going to tell you something that's just wrong. I'm not going to say your parameters are definitely inside the small ball. That would be embarrassing. So I think if you're working in approximate Bayesian methods, it's worth spending some time acknowledging that whatever you do, there will be failure modes. And there are different applications out there. There's not one approximate Bayesian method that's suitable. It depends on whether you've got like a neural net you're going to use in an engineering system where just some plausible parameters will do, or you're sort of wanting to be very conservative about what you rely on. Okay, so that was a story about what I would call modeling the posterior. There's this conditional distribution parameters in the data, and we can throw neural nets at that. So what I thought I'd do in the remaining sort of 10 minutes is say, well, there are 3 ingredients in Bayes' rule. What happens if you throw neural nets or machine learning methods at the other 3 parts? What are the failure modes? How would this work? How does it compare to the methods? So I have this other story about fitting a prior of a model, and I think priors are really important. There's no point doing all this fancy Bayesian stuff if your prior doesn't make sense. And so I was saying, there's no point doing a really fancy variational method for a Bayesian neural net unless the prior of a neural net actually makes sense. And in the physical sciences, you think carefully about some problems. So I have this story that I like saying here at NIPS because I did this work after talking to Phil Marshall at a NIPS workshop a few years ago. And he'd written this paper on measuring the mass of the Milky Way, which includes the dark matter halo that we think is probably there, we're sitting in the middle of. And they measured the mass of the Milky Way by looking at these things, the Magellanic Clouds, which are orbiting around us. So you measure the speed and location of those things, and you try and infer the mass of the thing that they're orbiting. And they're Bayesian, so they say we're inferring the properties of X, a vector containing the mass of the Milky Way and positions and velocities of the things orbiting around us, given observations Y, and the observations are noisy estimates of the positions and velocities of the things in X. So we don't directly observe the mass of the Milky Way. The only way we get any handle on it is by having a good prior. The prior ties together the elements of this vector. That's how the maps work for the things we can observe. So they get that prior through simulation. A lot of astronomy and cosmology works through simulation studies. So here is scatter plot showing a 7-dimensional space saying how the properties of the mass of a galaxy relate to the speeds and velocities of the things orbiting around it. So in the bottom right, there is a histogram of the masses of galaxies that were created in a simulation. And what these funky scatter plots show is that the mass of the galaxy is related to the speed of something orbiting around it in a quite complicated way. And that's embodied in the simulation. So we fit this 7-dimensional distribution using density estimation methods, and then we can use that as our prior in Bayesian inference. So we've got theory that gives us a prior, we've got telescopes that give us a likelihood, we observe the positions and velocities of things, that gives us a simple distribution. And then we just turn the handle on the mass to get inference about the mass of the Milky Way. And I used importance sampling to do this. No complicated approximate Bayesian inference needed. But you did need fancy methods to set up the prior. And I could fit the prior with a Gaussian. So I take this complicated data and I slap an elliptical ball on top of the whole lot, and I ignore all of the funky spikes and regions where there are no samples, and I just try and cover the whole lot. I then used a mixture of Gaussians to try and hone in on some of these little spikes that you see. That gets a better fit, but the mixture of Gaussians gets confused by hard boundaries and thresholds. And then I go in and use fancy neural net methods to try and fit this density better. So each time I'm trying to cut off more of the parameter space and say no, that we know a priori that that part of the space is wrong, but I'm trying not to cut off things that could be correct. So I don't want to use a GAN, or at least not the standard GAN. I'd like to use the sort of standard maximum likelihood style of this objective. So here's the posterior over the mass of the Milky Way. The grey line is if I fit a Gaussian, I have a vague prior, and I end up not learning much. And my beliefs become tighter and tighter as I fit better models to the prior. So priors can be important. And what I'd like to claim is that the neural net fits don't rule out things that could be true. So if I rerun this whole process with a fresh set of simulated data, I get a very similar plot. It's sort of stable. If I do held out data measures, then the neural net fit seems to be really good. And what I'm missing is good theory that says something concrete about how I'm not going to screw up. I'd like to give a sort of technical statement about not ruling out masses of galaxies that could be true. Intuitively, I think this is a reasonable thing to do, and it agrees with the sort of Monte Carlo methods that people were using before, but we're missing theory. Okay, so my third story is on modeling likelihoods, and that has a long history in statistics, sort of surrogate modeling, and I think is, again, an important part of how practical Bayesian inference works across the sciences, and people are beginning to use machine learning methods there. So here's a cartoon of what you might be doing. Your data could be something like time series. You could have a systems biology model with a bunch of differential equations where things evolve, and one of the chemicals in your experiment you can measure. I think there's models actually produced from some queuing model, sort of operations research model. So you might do multiple experiments. You observe a whole bunch of time series, and then you want to infer the posterior distribution over the parameters that generated those time series. And this is a model that you can simulate, but it's sort of difficult to do Bayesian inference in it. You could attempt to use some sort of recognition network, but it has to absorb all of the data, and these are sort of high-dimensional objects, and you can hold off them. And another natural thing you could do is fit the likelihood. You could fit the probability of one of these traces in the parameter. So that's something that I think we could do easily. These curves look fairly simple. I could write a generative model that would spit out curves that look like that, and then parameterize it with parameters theta, and I could build a surrogate quick model that represents the distribution over a time series curve given a few parameters. And if you do that, you won't fit it perfectly. So when you simulate your surrogate model, if you fitted it with likelihoods, it will generate a time series that you've never actually seen in the real simulator. It will cover sort of possibilities. It doesn't want to rule out things that might happen. And when you do that, who knows what effect that will have on the fluid. So we have guarantees that we're not going to rule out X's that might happen. But we care about dependent parameters here. So if you naively take a state-of-the-art neural density estimator and you plug it in to estimate the likelihood, what happens is you get a posterior plot like this one, and then you say, where are the true parameters? And the answer is, oh, up here somewhere, like totally away from your posterior. So you're just embarrassingly wrong. As far as the sciences are concerned, it is not cool. You have just said the parameters are definitely in this ball, and they're not. So you need to think quite carefully about where the approximations are coming in and where they're going to affect. So I linked here to a paper where these authors are trying to model likelihood ratios. The thing we care about here is getting the parameter surface correct, and we want to match that. We don't actually care particularly about the state over distribution over data we haven't seen. And so, you need to think quite carefully about how these things all fit together. Okay, so I think that's the end of my story. Here's my website. So I work on a series of neural density estimators, and the reason we're doing that is to do approximate Bayesian inference. I'm passionate about getting good parameter beliefs in the physical sciences, and what I like from this community is much better approximate Bayesian methods to apply to these neural networks, so that I can take the Bayesian machinery seriously in what I'm fitting. At the moment, I'm left really doing a lot of held-out data verification to check that what I'm doing is correct, because frankly, I can't trust the Bayesian machinery. I'm just going to randomly advertise that I'm still doing multi-color left, and there's still other papers on you can choose. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Iain. This was a great talk. Is there any question? Well, before you think about questions, I would like to ask poster presenters not to place the posters while the speakers are talking. Please wait for the break. Thank you. So, is there any question that someone would like to ask?
A very small question back on your example of the density estimation, the previous slide. So if you look at the neuron, the purple line, no, the next one. So you have like this little bump on the left. Do you know why this is? Sort of a footing or?
The question here is this little bump. I've noticed this is an interesting, sociological point that usually in sort of physical science stuff, I get bimodal posteriors, and whenever I put up a plot of bimodal posterior, including this one, someone always goes, ooh, why is that? Especially if the true answer turns out to be in the smaller mode, because they're like, oh, you're wrong, why did that other mode exist? But this is the way inference works, that, you do get intersecting constraints that sometimes intersect in a couple of different places, and you get these modes. So if you simulate enough galaxies in this problem, the dumb important sampling brute force way of tackling this problem, and that mode is there in that important sampling method. So I'm pretty sure this is correct. What's worrying, though, is that what happens when you move on to a problem where you can't brute force it. The whole reason we were doing this was because we wanted to do an analysis that the important sampling method wouldn't work on, and it's pretty difficult to sort of work out whether these things are correct or not.
So I had a question concerning the first part of your talk. It's, if I understood correctly, what you obtain at the end of your method is something that can take any data set and return an approximate posterior.
Yeah.
And I can certainly see, problems where that is very, very relevant. If we have many data sets and we need many posteriors, sure, why not do that? But in this specific example, you have one data set and you want one posterior. So should we solve the specific problem at hand instead of solving all the problems, since we only have one problem?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. If we simulate parameters from the prior, we're trying to learn the mapping between parameters and data in the entire space when we know that we're only interested in this part. And part of what we're doing here with this iterative procedure is saying, let's get an idea of what part of the parameter space is interesting and focus our attention there. And compared to the sort of sequential ABC methods that have a similar flavor, we're converging faster with this approach. This isn't an ideal procedure because we're sampling parameters. Tony O'Hagan would say this is fundamentally unsound. Like, we should be doing decision theory to work out which simulations to run rather than picking them at random. But we've sort of been cornered into this by what we're able to push through in the math. It's much easier if you model the likelihood to decide which simulations to run. It's just that I don't know how to get trustworthy results that way.
One more question?
That's a great talk, and I agree with many of the points that you raised. But I do have I do worry that you're taking a problem which might be quite difficult to solve in itself, and then fitting a Bayesian neural network, which we know is a really difficult problem in itself. To solve that problem feels like we may have actually ended up with a harder problem than what we started with. So could you comment on that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Like, back when sort of people were first using Gaussian process surrogate models, people would sort of say the same thing. So in the end here, we're able, in the application to try to simulate enough data that once we've worked out a parameter region, we think that we can sort of nail the problem, at least in that small region, and we can fit it. So in this algorithm, we're really using the Bayesian machinery just as a heuristic to guide it, and at the end, we'll simulate the hell out of it. I may be asking too much to say, can you make Bayesian methods for neural networks that are trustworthy, that I can like shut my eyes and it will all work out? But I feel like we could at least make the heuristics a lot more performant, and so that's my challenge.
Thank you. Let's continue the speaker.